Hello, everyone, and welcome to Subtle Asian Book Club. We are so excited because today we are discussing our, what month is it? September? Our September book of the month, which is A Wish in the Dark. And we're so lucky to have the author with us here today. But first, quick introductions. Hi, I'm Tiffany. I read by Tiffany.
And I'm Alexandra from Twirling Pages. And Christina, would you like to introduce yourself and your book? And as a quick icebreaker, do you have any bucket list items you want to complete before 2022?
Oh, sure. Yes, I'm Christina Soontornvat, and I'm the author of A Wish in the Dark. And A Wish in the Dark is a fantasy story. It's a twist on Les Miserables set in a magical Thailand. It is about a boy who escapes from a prison and the prison warden's daughter who is determined to track him down and turn him in. And it's about social justice and the difference between law and justice. And I'm just so very excited to be here. And then bucket list item. Yes, actually, in a couple of weeks, my family and I were going to be going to Big Bend National Park. This was a trip that we were supposed to take. Like, this was our COVID postponed trip. Like, we're supposed to go right when COVID hit and like couldn't go anywhere. So we're finally getting to go, and I'm very excited.
Well, we hope you have a great time. I also didn't realize this was a Les Mis like reinterpretation or retelling or inspired book, but
yeah, we can
see the resemblances now.
Yeah, I realized it after when I was looking on Goodreads and I was like rereading the summary, because I tend to like go into books without reading the summary and then like read it after. And then on the bottom of the summary, like the blurb is like, oh yeah, Les Mis retelling. And I was like, what? This makes so much sense.
Oh, I love that you didn't know that going into it. Like that, that is great. And I love that it clicked after. Because it's very loose. It's a loose retelling.
Did you go into the book like knowing that you wanted to make it kind of comp to Les Mis, or was that something that happened afterwards?
No, yeah, I started it knowing that I wanted to write some sort of twist on the story. That Les Miserables is one of my favorite books. It's a book that like made a really huge impression on me when I read it in high school, and I read it because I was just like obsessed with the story, you know, and as a middle schooler, obsessed with the musical, like just sang it all the time. And then finally read the book, and it just really like just changed my outlook on a lot of things. So I went into writing A Wish in the Dark knowing that I wanted to make a twist on it, but kind of like not knowing how I was going to make that happen. And yeah, so working out like how much I wanted to stay close to the storyline, how much I wanted to stray from it. That was, I had to figure all of that out on the fly. But so it was nice to have like, just kind of, I knew sort of the premise, the basic premise was going to be this chase, this like cat and mouse game chase.
So I guess that's a little bit related to our first question, but if you want to dive into it a little bit deeper, what inspired you to write A Wish in the Dark?
You know, well, I mean, that definitely, I started with the nugget of wanting to twist on Les Mis, but I really wanted to write something set in Thailand. I just wanted it. It was going to be very different from the last book I wrote. And I had never written anything set in a Thai setting. Never even really read many books set in a Thai setting before, you know, especially like middle grade or young adult, you know, growing up, I had never read anything like that. So I really wanted to like take a big leap and just dive into it, into like the Thai culture, the world building, make it all about Thailand. And I just sort of like, that just kind of took over. So really like the world kind of built itself. And that was a huge inspiration. You know, my dad is an immigrant from Thailand. So he immigrated to Texas, and I was born in Texas. He's kind of moved over to Thailand now. Like he lives there most of the time, and I have family who lives there. So I grew up going back and forth a lot, and, you know, still travel there a lot. So his stories about growing up in Thailand, about being a kid in Bangkok are very much an inspiration for the book, for sure.
Yeah, it was so beautiful to read the setting and like to see it represented on the pages, especially as like a middle grade book, because as you did say, it's kind of hard, unfortunately, to find that kind of representation in middle grade and young adult. And we loved how you managed to weave in like kind of like harder topics such as like wealth disparities and poverty and justice and like so much more. Why did you believe that it was important to touch on these topics, especially since the middle grade audience is relatively young?
Yeah, I mean, I think middle grade readers are thinking about these things, you know. I mean, a lot of them are dealing with these issues, you know. I mean, there are middle grade readers who are dealing with living in poverty and who, you know, have family members or know people who are incarcerated. I mean, you know, that touches so many of us. And like everyone in this country is somehow affected by wealth inequality, you know, in some way. Like it's such a huge issue in our society. You know, I say in this country, but really it's like it's all over the world. And kids now are so much more aware of these things. They're so much more cultured. They're just more like in tune with, I think, issues that are going on than like when I was a kid. I'm kind of like didn't pay as much attention to the news and big societal issues as I think kids are doing today. So it always felt like, it never felt like I was stretching too much. Like I think kids are especially like in middle school, upper elementary, you're really starting to kind of look up and look around at the world, you know, and realize, oh, it's not just like this little bubble that I've been living in as a kid. Like there are all these things that are going on, and I want to talk about them, and I want to like pick them apart and like debate them. And, you know, you're kind of starting to realize, oh, things aren't always just black and white. There's just a lot of gray. So it just seemed like perfect issues to bring up in a middle grade book.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's perfect. Because I also feel like for a lot of us, reading is a great way to initially learn empathy, especially when you're a lot younger. Do you do a lot of, because it's like a middle grade book, do you do a lot of like school visits? Do you talk to a lot of these kids about these topics then?
Yes, yeah, and that's been amazing. I've gotten like that. That's like the best part about being an author is going to talk about kids. I wish I could like not do the work and then just actually just go spend all day with kids talking about books. That would be a great job. No, I'm just kidding. But that's been amazing to have school visits and, you know, talk to kids who have read the book, and they are like really talking with a lot of passion and sophistication about, you know, about mass incarceration or, you know, about this systemic inequality. Like it's just really amazing. I'm always so impressed with these kids, and just how compassionate they are, you know, like you said, how empathetic they are. Like I really believe that kids, their hearts are all in the right place. And so like I kind of view my job as an author is to like give them stories to let them know their heart is in the right place, you know?
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I totally agree. Because I feel like it was really refreshing to see all of these like harder topics or like typically perceived as harder topics woven into a middle grade story or like something that is lighthearted. And so it balances out, but also like allows kids to explore these topics when sometimes adults or like older people are like, oh no, you're young, you wouldn't understand it. So like I'm just not even going to bother telling you these things. But a lot of times like kids are super smart and we forget about that, but they know everything, and now they're getting even smarter because
Yeah, I think we got a comment about that too.
yeah, this one, yes,
Totally. I absolutely agree, Patri.
I'm
I
going.
mean, yeah, I think like, I think once you grow up and you become an adult, it's like you want to protect children or something. It's hard to remember like, okay, when I was 10 years old, I was ready to talk about this. You know, they don't get as much credit as we should give them.
Alexandra's gonna hate me because I have a question that I didn't throw into the outline we sent you, but I'm really curious to know, when you go to these like author visits with a lot of these children, what's like the number one question they ask you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, they ask me like, where do you get your ideas? They ask, what's your favorite book you've ever written? How can I become an author? Sometimes they ask me things like, oh, they always like want to know if I have pets and like who's my favorite pet, or like, they want to know about my kids. They want to know. I think they kind of just like want to know, are you a regular person? Like they're asking all these questions that I think what they're getting at is like, are you normal? Are you just a normal person? So I'm always happy to talk about that. Sometimes the teachers are like shocked. They're like, don't ask her personal questions. And I'm like, it's okay.
But bringing it back to the questions we had prepared, the entire premise and setting is very vivid and well crafted. We had so much fun just learning about Thailand and Thai culture. In fact, one of the main reasons why we picked this book was because one of our Thai reader blogger friends, May, shout out to May, was raving about this book so much. We were like, okay, we have to read this. Like, it's going to be an amazing read. But what was your research process like when creating this book? Did you weave in personal experiences growing up?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is incorporating, my experiences visiting Thailand. I talked to my dad a lot. Like that was a really cool thing about working on the book, is that, I would just call him, like ask him for his stories growing up. He lived in Bangkok in, it was like the 50s and 60s, and they lived, his family like lived on the river. The river was like a really big part of their life. His family owned a cargo boat that was their job, is they would take cargo up and down the river. And he just like will have crazy stories. Like him and his friends would swim in the Chao Phraya River, which is like swimming in the Mississippi River. Like it's this huge river, and there would be like taxi boats going by, and they would just like grab onto a rope hanging off the back of the boat and just like hitch a ride across the river. And I'm like, that is insane. Like you could have drowned many times, but just so collecting all these stories of his. The actual research that I did is I did research about Buddhist monasteries and like Thai temples. And so my dad had also been a Thai monk a couple times when he was younger. So I asked him about that. But I also, setting scenes in the temple, I wanted to make sure like, okay, I'm being respectful. That I didn't want to like, break any taboos or things like that. So I did research about that.
Yeah, actually, I feel like the whole section with all of like when Pong was in the Buddhist monastery and he was like learning about all the teachings from Father Cham, I was like, oh, I love this. It kind of gives me Avatar vibes, mostly because I'm seeing like monks, but then also just like it feels so pure and like so good. And then I was like, maybe I want to visit like a Buddhist monastery one day and then like explore Thailand and then just like be super immersed in this culture. And I am experiencing it while reading it.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that it gave you Avatar vibes. I'm going to tell my kids and they're going to think I'm like the coolest person ever. So thank you.
Yes. So we had a question talking about the title of the book. So I feel like the title of the book is super fitting for the story. We love the title, Wish in the Dark, and it captures the overarching theme of the story. What's the story for how you thought of the title? Did you think of the title first, or was it the story and then the title?
Yeah, definitely title came way late. I'm usually so bad at titles. I've gotten a little bit better, but for a long time, I just called it River Book like that. Like, I don't even remember what we sold it under. It wasn't A Wish in the Dark. And then my editor and I were like, okay, let's brainstorm like all these different titles. And then we, I can't remember how we landed on A Wish in the Dark, but once we found it, we were like, okay, that's perfect, because both wishing, that is something that it's a big theme in the story, be careful what you wish for, but also like, a wish that you have in your heart. And then A Wish in the Dark is sort of like, a light in the darkness. And kind of one of the themes in the book is if just one person shines a light, how that can just go out and, catch more lights on fire. So it just felt perfect. It felt good. I was happy because I think it might have been mine idea. And that rarely happens. Usually someone else like has all the good ideas and I help pick them, but.
No, I just really love that. Just the way you described it earlier is so much better than the way I'm going to end up butchering it right now. But I just love the reoccurring theme of the orbs and light, and how just one represents that one facet of social inequality within this book, but also how it represents hope and everything good in the world at the same time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that part of it, like really digging into the theme and like making the metaphors and the imagery like all reinforce each other. It just all, when it clicked, it just felt really good.
Another tangent question, was it always like orbs, was orbs something that you had set in the beginning? Because I think that one was just so cool to read about. Like a
Thank you.
physical manifestation of light.
Yeah, that was like from the very beginning. I was thinking about that. And that comes from, like if you've have y'all ever been to Bangkok, or have you ever been to like Hong Kong or anything like that? So when you like these cities, I guess it would be like Los Angeles, maybe even like these. So I'm a country kid, and you go to a big city, and like, these cities are up all night. They thrive, it's the city of lights, and lights are shining all night. And so like when you go to Bangkok, because it's a city on the river, you get there and you're super jet lagged. And so you're like awake at night. So this is what I remember as a kid, especially being allowed to like go out at midnight, which I would never be allowed to be out at midnight because the whole family would not be able to sleep. So we go out at midnight, go get food, and the lights are just like, they just feel magical. And, they're shining in the water, they're reflecting, you're kind of like in a daze. So just like this idea that, okay, all of these lights are what's going to be magic, and like, let's make them like these perfect spheres. It just feels like a magic fantasy thing,
As we were describing it, I'm like envisioning like Thailand, but meets Tangled. That one scene where they're like on the river and the lights are going off. I'm like, so magical.
Yes, yeah, and that is, I remember when I saw Tangled, I was like, is that, because I always thought that those lanterns, those paper lanterns, was like a Thai custom, because they do it like in the countryside. They have like a big festival where I think you make a wish and you light it and you let it go up. But maybe it's also in other cultures too. Or maybe they were like, we'll make this Tangled, but we'll just take this Thai custom and make it part of the Tangled world. I don't know.
I was envisioning like whenever you're on a plane and it's like you're approaching your airport at night and you just see all like the buzzing lights, especially like when you fly into LA, or for me when I go to Taiwan, when you fly into Taiwan at night, you just see like a bunch of ocean that's just pitch black, and then you just see the lights coming through, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and it's like, it's a little thrill. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
So of course we have to ask you, what has been your favorite part about writing A Wish in the Dark? Do you have any favorite moments, quotes, scenes, anything that really stuck with you that you were like, oh, yes, I'm so proud I wrote that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are definitely like parts that I was like, this is fun. This doesn't feel like work. I think, right, because the story goes from Pong's point of view and Nook's point of view and goes back and forth, the scenes where they were interacting together, there's not that many, but every time I had them together in the same scene, it would just felt really like exciting and like electrically charged, like I really enjoyed writing that, because they had been like, just nearly missing each other or passing each other so often and misunderstanding each other. Definitely, I think my favorite scene that I wrote was probably when Bong is on the river and he sees the ghost of Father Cham, and like kind of understands, like it all comes back, and he understands like what the purpose of everything has been. That I kind of wrote that in just one full swoop, like, and it did not change a lot from the beginning to the end, which is very rare. I usually rewrite a lot, but that one didn't so much. So,
yeah, that was such a good scene. Now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, I'm so excited to reread this.
Yay! Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the next question. One of our favorite things about this book was the world building and setting. Chautana really came to life when we read the book. Is Chautana based on any particular city? I'm assuming Bangkok, because you've mentioned it prior in this like, past 20 minutes. But then how did you go about incorporating fantasy world into the elements? Was it also inspired by maybe some other fantasy cities, or how did it become into what it is now?
Yeah.
Also, did we pronounce that correctly? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, Chatana or Chatana. Yeah,
Oh.
either one. And yes, definitely Bangkok, but like old Bangkok, you know, like I was thinking of the Bangkok that my dad grew up in. So like, you know, before there were cars, or before a lot of cars. There were cars. When he'll kill me if I said it was like before cars. There were cars when he was a kid, but just not a lot. But also, you know, like, so Thailand is, you know, really it's a country where rivers are really important. And so there's a lot of cities, villages on the river. And so for those communities, the river is just like the lifeblood, you know, like you do everything on the river. Like that's where you get your food, you know, you trade, you know, the markets, there's like floating markets that you go to on the river. That's how you like get to and from school. You might ride your boat. So, and it's like that also in like Vietnam and Laos too. So it's very, you know, like a Southeast Asian river setting, I think is probably what really inspired it. Yeah, as far as fantasy, you know, just I think just the river. I didn't realize when I decided I was going to set this book on a river, like what an awesome literary element that is. And after I did that, I was like, okay, I understand now. Like Mark Twain or like all these other authors who have set their books on a river. It's very much like, you know, it gives you two sides. So you can have like the challenge of getting from one side to the other. You can have, you know, in Chatana, there's a, you know, the east side and the west side, and the wealth inequality is very stark there. And then you have like a flow, like you can get caught in it and get swept away, or you have to like, you know, fight your way up the river. It just like gives you a lot to work with. So that was a really big learning experience for me. I was like, I can take like a natural element and like really kind of milk it for all it's worth. So that river was very important.
It brought along a lot of great adventures.
Yes, that too.
So moving a little bit away from like research and theme styled questions, we wanted to dive more into plot and characters. So of course we have to ask you, who is your favorite character and who is the most challenging character to write?
My favorite character is Father Cham. He's just, I just need a Father Cham maybe in my life. Maybe that's why I wrote him and love him so much. He's just the best to write, like so much fun. I also love Somkit. He is Somkit was like also a blast to write because he was always like, you know, stuffing his face with food and saying funny things. The most challenging, probably Pong was the most challenging character to write. Nook, I feel, is the character who's the most like me. So she, you know, she grows a lot through the story. She comes to the story with these real preconceived notions, like these really like cut and dry philosophy of how the world works. And she really softens and changes by the end. So that's based a lot on me and my own, you know, evolution and thinking from being a child to being a grown up. But Bong was very hard. Like I didn't want to make him too good. You know, sometimes when I was writing him, he was like too perfect, too pure and good. And so I had to like really work on making him real. So yeah. Good question.
Is there any story or are there any stories behind how you came up with their names?
Oh yeah. So in Thai, the Thai people have usually have a long first name and then they'll have their last name, but almost everybody has a short nickname. So I have a cousin and his nickname is Bong. And actually it's like a really common, it's like Paul, or, you know, like a really common nickname in Thailand. You would meet lots of Bongs, but the names often, especially for older people, they often have a meaning. So Pong means protect, And so I felt like, oh, that's perfect, because that's what he ends up doing. And Nook, it means bird. So like in the story, there's a lot of times I refer to her as like, she's like looking like a bird, like looking around, or, she's like a wounded bird, or she needs to fly away. It just felt perfect for her. Like she was a little blackbird. And then, oh yeah, my dad helped me so much with the names. I was like, okay, I have these two criminals. One of them's really big. One of them's really short and like slimy. And he was like, okay, make the big guy Yai, because that means big, and make the little guy Yord, because I can't remember what Yord means, but he was helping me a lot. That was fun.
Yeah. I love the story of how the names came to be. I remember that one scene when Nook is trying to find Pong, and she's like going through like the crowd. She's like, do you know Pong? It's like, oh yeah, Pong's right there. She's like, no, not that one.
Yeah, I remember that. That one made me laugh. I listened to that on audiobook and I was like,
Yep, lots of Pongs.
Father Chom was also a character that we all loved and cherished and respected. I think all of my favorite scenes, well, okay, it's kind of hard because I like a lot of the scenes, but all of his scenes, they just like make me feel so warm inside. And was the final plot twist, which we forgot to mention in the earlier, but we will be going into spoilers, so please read the book. The final plot twist is one of the plot twists is when you find out the governor's relationship with Father Chum. Was that something that you had always planned earlier in your drafting, or was that something that came up as you were writing?
That came up as I was writing, and that's one of those things that like, I think you outline and you have a plan, and then something comes to you and you're like, this is perfect. It's like it just comes out of the air, sort of. So the big reveal is that the governor, who has these powers, which he uses, to cruel purposes, actually the whole reason he has them is because Father Chum wished for him to have those. So all of Father Chum's wishes come true. And so in his early days, when he was trying to make the world a better place, he wished for him to be able to make light. And so that's how he got his power. And I liked the idea that like, the whole book, Father Chum is like this really benevolent man, and you love him so much. He just seems so pure, but he also made a mistake, and there's something to me about people who are elders, who are nearing the end of their life, who they still know that they have made a mistake and they're still trying to make it right. Like there's something about that in a character. When I read that in a character, I just gravitate towards that so much. It's just so human. I think like all of us, we're going to be, when we're that age, we're probably going to have like something that we're like, oh, I wish I would have done that, So so that was just to give him some more depth, I think, and like make him more human. And I also just really love the idea of be careful what you wish for. Any story that has be careful what you wish for, I'm like, I love it already.
I really love that. It was like a secret message, like you get revealed in the end.
Yeah, and I really liked how you added that decision like later, because it was like you humanize both Father Chum and also the governor, because before the governor is kind of like, he's like a big power figure, he's scary, and he does makes poor decisions, or we think poor decisions because he's like harming so many people, but then it's like, how did he get here, what's his history, like what is his background, and then you find out like, oh, that's how it happened, and it starts to like kind of make sense. And then it's same for Father Chum, where you kind of like idolize him a little bit because he's like such a father figure, he treats you so well and like all these wonderful things, but then you also know like, oh, he's also made mistakes, and that's also okay because he's trying to like, or past tense because he died, but like he was trying to like own up to it in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you liked that. And yes, I agree. Like it also humanizes the governor and it makes it, I wanted it to be like the governor did have good intentions when he started, like he really was trying to help people at the beginning and he just really got twisted kind of, by wanting to control everyone, and his view of the world just really got twisted around. And because I think that's true, like in the real world. I think we've got a lot of leaders who they started out like really wanting to do good things. They have good intentions, but they're just somehow they got twisted up and they're not doing the right thing anymore.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this quote someone once told me, or I read somewhere. It was like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
That's right. That's totally true.
But we'll pivot to a slightly happier note to talk about Pong and Somkit's friendship, because it was just, we loved that brotherly like bromance and relationship, and like it was just so heartwarming to read amidst like such tough topics that the book dives into as well. So how do you think their friendship really shapes the tone of the story? What really made you feel like it was so pivotal to include this?
Yeah, I just really felt like Pong, he had a hard life, his story was so harsh, and I just like he needed someone in his life that was ride or die, that was like, gonna be there for him no matter what, who loved him tremendously. And that, my dad, he had a lot of friends growing up that were really close to him that were not, they're not brothers, but they really would have, fought like brothers for each other. Like they really loved each other and stayed close. And I wanted them to not be afraid of being affectionate. Like it's so clear they're affectionate with each other, and they're, but they're boys. They're middle school aged boys. So they also hug awkwardly in some of the scenes. But I think that I wanted Bong to have like a constant. Like there's always going to be this person, he lost Father Cham, he lost Ampai, and he doesn't have any parents, but Somkit is always going to have his back.
Yeah. That really made me like, oh, the kind of crying emoji right now.
I'm so glad you liked him. And my dad's best friend growing up was named Somkit.
Oh,
yeah. So and he passed away not too long ago. So he passed away before the book came out, but it was a great way to honor him. And he was like really funny and like goofy like that too, and always eating lots of stuff.
So is Somkit's character sort of briefly kind of based off of your dad's best friend?
I think like their friendship really was, and I sort of made Somkit up. And my training was as an engineer. So that's when I went to college, I didn't study creative writing. I studied mechanical engineering. And so I knew I wanted Somkit to be like this little engineer. Like he's making solar cells on his rooftop and figuring out all this electrical engineering stuff.
Yeah, I love those scenes when he's like, I got it, guys, like I found it. And I could just like imagine, whenever I imagine someone like that, it's like someone with like wiry hair, it's like kind of sticking up everywhere, and he's like holding onto his food, and he's like, I found like the thing that would change everything.
I love it.
Another one of the shocking reveals earlier, I was like, the plot twist, but not really. There are a couple plot twists. Another shocking reveal is about Nook's parentage and her biological mother. Was that something that you had planned, or was that something that also came up? Nook is a really, really interesting character, and I love reading about her because of like just everything about her, like the way she is and like the way she perceives herself and how she's like trying to develop and change. And do you think it would have changed the story if Nook hadn't found out about her true parentage?
Yeah, that I'm so glad you asked this, because this was like something that I just went back and forth on so much. So Nook finds out that her birth mother is actually a prisoner at the prison where her father was a warden, and I think that unfolded just kind of as I was writing, I knew I wanted her to have her family has a secret, and the secret is about her, and there is some shame involved in that. But the family loves each other very much, and I knew I wanted her mother, her adopted mother, to really, really, really love her, even though she kind of doesn't understand her and it kind of seems mean at times, but everything's coming from a place of love. I just feel like there's a lot of families that are really complicated. And, I have known families like our own extended family. There's a lot of like complicated stories like this where there's secrets. And I just really kind of wanted to depict that in the book, because I know there's a lot of kids out there who have things like that going on. But the part about like, is she going to find out about this like truth of where she comes from? At one point I was like, no, she should like change her mind. She should like change her mind about Bong before she finds out, because then it's like, oh, the only reason she empathizes with Pong is because her mother was also, in prison. But then I was like, it's okay. She's a kid. It's okay for her to like have this revelation after. It makes sense. It doesn't cheapen it for her. Like, it's still this very important revelation, and she really still like changes what she believes. So yeah, that was really hard.
I don't think it cheapens it at all. I think like for many people, you learn to empathize more, especially if you've experienced it yourself too.
Okay, good.
Thank you. And also I feel like the moment when she like kind of realizes is when they're all in the prison together, and she's in the prison because of like her past or whatever. But then it's the moment when Pong goes back and he chooses to help her, and she's like, why would you choose to help me when I was so terrible to you? And it's that moment, and not specifically, oh, because like my mom was also in this prison and like all of this other history, but it's like more so of like the choice of empathy and seeing someone choose it for her when she has done something like terrible, and she's like, oh, I should be a better person, or like I should choose something different for future choices.
Yeah, absolutely. She can't reconcile it. Like, it makes no sense to her. She like kind of has to, okay, so since this is adult book club, or YA and adult book club, so I feel like I can talk about this. So this is in Les Miserables, in the book, in the story, and also the musical. There is a moment in that storyline where Jean Valjean, the main character, does let the man who's been chasing him, he lets him go. Javert, he lets him go. And Javert like cannot comprehend, like, why would you do that? Why would you let me go? I've been chasing you. I've been trying to put you back in prison, and you let me go. And in the actual novel, the police officer cannot accept that, and he actually commits suicide because he cannot accept it. Of course, like, I was never ever going to do that in the story, but I knew like that was also going to be a moment for her where she was just like at her lowest, like everything she thought was wrong, everything she thought about this boy was wrong. She's gonna have to, if she's gonna come back up, she's gonna have to change everything that she thinks. So yeah, she went through a lot.
Yeah, as I was reading it, I was like, I cannot imagine the amount of trauma this poor kid is going through, because it's like, it all happens at once too. It's like she goes to the governor, who is someone she like respects and idolizes, and he pours all of this information, and she's like betrayed by the person that she used to idolize, and also her family, because they've been keeping this for her. And then like this thing with Pong, she's just like, what's going on? I'm gonna run away. And then she gets back together with her dad, and it's super wholesome and super kind. And I'm like, yes, you let those tears come out, girl. Let it out.
Yeah, so she had to be strong. Like, that's why, in the beginning, from the beginning, she was like fighter because she was going to go through a lot. So she had to be really tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's probably like my favorite character in the book because I think it's just so eye-opening, especially with like I'm imagining if I read this when I was younger, like it'd be so eye-opening to see this character just unpacking an entire belief system of what she thought used to be right and was like justice and is the law and is good, but understanding and having a lot more empathy for the world around her too.
Yeah. I think, I mean, kids have said that they relate to her and they really like her. So that makes me glad.
Yeah, and I also feel like a lot of times, like when we're younger, we're always told to like toughen up or like be hard or whatever. But then this is like the complete opposite, where you're told to like be softer, and there's like value in kindness and value and empathy and compassion and all these things that are seen as softer. And it's like, this is so beautiful. Yeah,
Makes me so happy.
yeah. And also, I kind of wanted to touch on like Nook's. You talked about family, and I really liked how you delved deeper into the family relationship. And you talked about how her adoptive mom is a little bit harder on the outside, but she really, really does love Nook, and it's like complicating. And I thought that was so representative of a lot of Asian families, because a lot of times like Asian families, Asian parents do tend to have like tough love of like having these strict rules, and we're like, oh, I'm doing this for your own good. And when you're younger, it can be kind of hard to see that like they do it out of like love and kindness and just like all these positive things, but then like in the process it can be really hard. So I love just seeing that unfold.
Oh, I'm so glad that resonated. Yeah, I totally agree. Where you're like, how could someone do that? You know, I mean, just like choices that some of our elders have made in the past, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, okay, I totally get it. Like they had my best interests at heart, even if they, you know, were doing something that I hated at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So another question that we had for you was, are you working on anything new right now?
I am. Yes, actually. So my next novel that comes out, I just turned in like the final edits on, and it's called The Last Map Maker. And so that comes out in March. It's very different from A Wish. To me, it's really different from A Wish in the Dark. But it's also fantasy. And so it's about a girl named Sai, who is an apprentice to the most famous map maker in the kingdom. And she's hiding secrets, she comes from a criminal family, and she wants to get away from that. She wants to like lead a respectable life. She wants to like, you know, lift herself up out of this lower rung that she's in. And so her employer gets this opportunity to go and discover and make a map of this mysterious continent that may or may not exist. And so she gets herself onto the ship, and they go in search of this mysterious continent. The legends about the continent say that it is protected by sea serpents, sea dragons that prowl the waters. And she starts to realize maybe those legends are true. There's lots of secrets on board the ship. There's lots of mutinous things, betrayals going on. So she has to kind of figure out like, how far is she willing to go to get her dreams?
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah, that sounds so good.
So it's Thai inspired, but not as closely as A Wish in the Dark. It's more like a loose Southeast Asian world.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so much fun to write. And it's in first person. So it was very different from writing A Wish in the Dark. Mm-hmm. And then other things, I'm also working on a graphic novel that's going to come out next year. And it is totally different because it's a memoir, and it is about my experience trying out for cheerleader in the 7th grade. So in the 7th grade, so Tiffany, now that you are in Texas, have you like absorbed the Texas football obsession? Like, are you seeing that?
Yeah. I literally just went to like my work team, we went to go watch the Dallas Cowboys game.
Oh, okay.
Or like part
perfect.
of it.
There you go. All right. So yes, Dallas Cowboys. And then like, so I grew up in a small town that's like an hour away from where Tiffany lives. And football was like, everybody was obsessed with football, and all the girls, you got to be a cheerleader. And so at my school in 7th grade, if you wanted to be a cheerleader, you had to try out in front of the entire school. So they would come into the auditorium and sit in the bleachers, and you came out and did your routine with a partner by yourselves in the silence of the gym with everyone watching you. And then those people went back and voted on who got to make cheerleader or not.
That's
so
traumatizing for
That
a
is
7th grader.
traumatizing.
Right? Is so traumatizing. And that is what this graphic novel is about. And it's also about just like being Asian American in a small Texas town, and lots of funny things and heartbreaking things too.
Is there a projected release for that one?
And that is, I think it's going to be September of next year. So a whole year. So yeah, we have an illustrator. Her name is Joanna Cacao, and she's amazing. Like, she has sketches done, and it's just like so cute. Like, it's going to be so good.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it's also like, it's so hard to write. I'm like, oh, this is so painful. I was so geeky. I was just like so nerdy in 7th grade.
But look at the growth. Look at where
Yeah.
you're so
There we go.
So I guess the next question that we have for you is like, what do you hope for readers to get out of your stories? You write so many different, like across different genres, I would say. Like you have so many different books. Do you have any messages you want to give to your readers?
Yeah, actually, someone asked me the other day in a panel. They said, like, what is one question your work is trying to your work asks? Like all of your work, what is the question that it asks? And I was like, oh, I never thought about that before, but that's really interesting. And so I was just like looking at all my books, is like, what is one thing that's in here? And so I feel like all my work kind of comes back to the idea of like, what can one person do? Like, what's the point? You're just one person in this huge world that has huge problems, or like you're one person at your school. Why are you important? Why do you matter? What sort of difference can you make? And of course, like, I'm trying to say, yes, you matter. You can make a difference. Like, you're very important. And so I feel like that's sort of what I want people to take away, I think.
That is so beautiful.
I
That
love
is
that.
my philosophy that I try to live to. Like, oh.
Yeah, we do. We can. You guys absolutely do. Like, look at this awesome thing that you started, this book club, bringing people together, bringing people joy. Like, even just that small thing is, so important.
Yeah, thank you. But like, I feel like for all of us, it can kind of feel lonely at times, especially since we are all like doing it in solitude. I feel like as an author, it can be really challenging because writing is like a solitary activity. You just write on your own. So having that drive you and having that keep you going is really powerful.
Yes. Yeah. So important.
So you talked about how you're releasing a graphic novel coming out soon, and you have an extensive portfolio writing picture books, chapter books, and middle grade, and all of these other, like, anything. Are there any genres that you love, right? And the areas that you want to explore in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I really love reading historical fiction, and I've never written historical fiction. I feel like The Last Mapmaker is like this closest I've gotten, because there's like, I researched a lot about like ships and the age of exploration, but of course it's just fantasy. It's not actually historical fiction. But I really think that if I was going to do something next, that's what I would want to do, is historical fiction. But it's going to be a while. I need to find some time to do a lot of research.
If you do historical fiction, or when you do historical fiction, do you have like a general idea of where you want to explore, like what time period or area or location?
Yeah. So the idea that I have, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get to it, but maybe if I say it here on the book club, you'll have to hold me to it. So like, there is a musical called The King and I. And it's also based on a novel about this this woman, a tutor, who she was a British woman, and she went and tutored the king of Siam's children. So she lived in the palace in Thailand. And so the king had multiple wives and he had lots of children, and she was their tutor. And it's a true story. So historically, like a historical moment. But of course, the play and the book has lots of stereotypes and inaccuracies. So I think it would be really awesome to like go back and write a book from the child, one of the children, like a prince or a princess, their perspective. So I don't know if I'll ever get around to that, but that would be really cool.
Yeah,
That sounds so cool.
yes, I'm ready for it, waiting for it. One of our book club members, Nina, has a small request, historical fantasy, and
Yes.
she's manifesting.
Yes. Okay. It's going to happen.
Subtle hint.
So Sandra and I have both mentioned we have not been to Thailand, but somewhere we would love, love, love to go one day. Where are your favorite places to visit / things to do?
Oh, in Thailand?
Mhm.
I mean, favorite things to do is definitely just like eating food. And I feel like when we go there and we're with my cousins, like the entire every day is just like a journey between meals and snacks. Like you meet for like coffee and snacks, and then like you just spend time getting to lunch, and then you spend time from lunch getting to like the ice cream place, so just eating all of the food. Like I actually just really love eating in shopping malls is one of my favorite things to do, because you can just like eat everything in a shopping mall. Like Thai shopping malls like have every single kind of food. And then places to go. So we always go to Bangkok because that's where my family lives. And then I have family that lives up north in Chiang Mai. And that is just, if you go to Thailand, most people go and they go to the beach, which is so beautiful. Like, of course, go to the beach. But the north is just gorgeous. Like there's just mountains. And Alexandra, you can go to temples. There are temples like every 10 steps, there's a different temple, and they're all so peaceful. Like it's just a very serene, like after you go to northern Thailand, I feel like you just feel refreshed, like clean, refreshed, like you've started over again,
Yes. Now I'm like, time to book my future trip to Thailand. And
Let's go.
Is there a favorite food that you would like love to eat in Thailand specifically that you can't find here, that you're like, there's nowhere in the US that I could find this food, and every single time I go to Thailand, I'm like, I have to eat this?
Well, probably, I feel like you could probably get it in Los Angeles. Like, I bet you can get it in Thai Town in Los Angeles. Like, so my favorite thing is desserts. Thai desserts are like, they're just like, they're not super sweet. Like just all Asian desserts, I feel like you can just eat so many of them because they're not that rich. They're very light. And I don't know the name of all of them, but they're just like, they're also gorgeous. They're beautiful. So like if you Google Look Shoop is one of my favorite desserts, and it's like marzipan, but it's made with beans, and they paint this glaze, and they look like teeny tiny like eggplants and teeny tiny mushrooms and teeny tiny tomatoes, and they'll weave like a little basket, and they'll put these teeny tiny fruits in there. I mean, vegetables. So it looks like a basket of vegetables, but it's like delicious desserts. Like, I mean, just stuff is so cute in Thailand. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like that's a really great way to like get your kids or get those who are younger acquainted with vegetables.
Oh yeah, eat all these. Like you can eat all of these little tiny vegetables.
Yeah, and then give them like a real vegetable and be like,
Yeah.
hey, this is the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, right, Mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna run into like a speed quote unquote round of questions. So the question that all the little kids ask you: what is your most anticipated upcoming release or a favorite release so far?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, I guess Last Mapmaker is anticipated. Wait, now do you mean of my books or other books that are coming out?
Like maybe a book in 2021 and 2022.
Oh,
or
that
of
is
other
not
books,
mine.
maybe. Well, we are very excited for yours, but are there any books you're looking forward to reading?
Yes, I'm sorry. This is like supposed to be lightning round, and I'm like asking all of these clarifying questions. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this year, a book I'm super okay. Probably the book me and my kids were most excited about was this middle grade book called Just Be Cool, Jenna Sakai. And it's a sequel to Keep It Together, Keiko Carter. It's by Debbie Michiko Florence. And it's just like the cutest middle school drama, love, romance, like friendship stories. And my girls love them. And they were just so excited about those. So that was 2021. Next year, what's coming out next year? Now my mind goes completely blank. Okay, I'll just tell you another book that's coming out, I think next month, is called The Troubled Girls of Dragomir Academy. And that is by Anne Ursu. And it's a fantasy, and it's really good. I got to read an early copy, and it's so great. It's like total smash the patriarchy kind of book.
Yes. Also middle grade? Yes, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Oh, another one that came out this year, and I know you had her on your show, Dial A for Aunties.
Yes.
I started that. I couldn't watch it the whole thing because I didn't finish it yet. So don't tell me, but I'm loving it. I just think it's so fun. It's like the most fun book I've ever read.
It's such a chaotic book, and you're just like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, it just keeps like getting crazier and crazier. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's so funny, and it's like super visual because I feel like I'm watching like a sitcom or like a TV show. It's like it gets better.
Yes, right. And she sold them film rights, right? They're gonna make a film.
Yeah.
When you're reading it, you're like, this is just it's a movie.
Yeah. It's super fun. This is, I know it's lightning round, but this is a kind of hard question. But is there a book that you'd recommend to everyone?
Yes, there is. Okay, actually I brought a few. Okay. So I have a memoir. So I brought some of my favorite Asian American books. So Tammy Duckworth is Thai American senator, and her memoir is unbelievably amazing. I just cannot recommend it highly enough. Her voice is great. She's a wonderful writer. Okay, I also have Wings versus the World, which is adult, and it's super fun. It's like Crazy Rich Asians, but they lose all their money, and they're like completely bankrupt.
Yeah,
and okay,
sure.
I have another one. I'm so sorry.
No, we love it.
Keep going.
This is one of my favorite graphic novels, The Best We Could Do. So this is adult, and it's a memoir by Thi Bui, and it's her family story of what happened to them after the Vietnam War. And it's amazing. It will make you cry for sure. The Best We Could Do. So yes, I recommend those to everyone.
I read The Best We Can Do, and it's so good, but also so sad.
So sad, yeah. But it just like all of these things, like, there's a lot of issues coming back up, about like refugees. Like it just really, it feels like it's of the moment so much.
For sure.
Another kind of hard question, but what is your favorite Asian food / favorite food in general?
Oh my gosh, I just cannot answer that question. I guess just noodles. Got to be noodles. Any kind. Noodle soups, Vietnamese noodles, Thai noodles, Singapore noodles, Korean noodles. That's like my comfort food. If I'm like, I don't know what to eat, I'm just gonna find a noodle place.
Do you usually like noodle soups, or do you like noodles like when you mix it with sauce and it's like a dry noodle?
Yeah, I feel like I usually go for a dry noodle. But I'm saying that because it's like 100 degrees outside right now in Austin. So I cannot imagine eating noodle soup until later. I'll change my answer in a couple months.
Makes sense.
Once it hits the winter.
Yeah.
Both a good food.
Well, those are all the questions that we had, and we're coming up on the hour. We had so much fun talking to you. This was like the hour flew by. It was such a blast. Same thing with the book. It was such a great experience to read it. If you haven't read the book yet, if you're out there, please read it. It's a fantastic time. And any other lasting messages?
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I loved all your questions, and it's just a joy to talk to you. Hope we get to talk again another time.
Yeah, it's such a joy. Be sure to be on the lookout next year for your 2 new releases. And we're so excited. Next month, October, we will be reading Jade War
Mhm.
by Hannah Lee. And super excited for that. Be on the lookout for when we have a live show. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.